Welcome to the podcast, James. Slightly different setup for us today.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about belief systems. So, obvious place to go to start is, what is a belief system, do you think? How would you define belief systems? It's such a big topic for a lot of people.
Um, I think for me, a belief system, because it can come from either angle. I taught RE for a long time, so belief systems can be either fundamentally the things that you yourself believe in as things that can be true or not, or I think if you can follow that up with just a moral code that people live by, I suppose it can become quite difficult to pin down in truth. It's a very big question in reality. It comes down largely to the way that people live their lives and want to live their lives. So that either comes down to, like I say, it's either a moral code or some connection to some sort of deity. But even then, it's like that connection to the deity creates the moral code that follows up, I suppose.
Yeah, I would agree. For the purpose of our listeners, obviously there's some worldwide listeners. What is RE?
Religious education or religious studies within the UK, it's got different ecosystems as well because it's got, if you do it in a faith school, it'll be tied in very much to that faith. So,
Yeah.
um, or it'll be, if you're in a secular school, it'll be a lot more generalist. And yeah, it's something that every school is expected to have at least some of in the curriculum. It's sort of compiled by collections of different people from the local religious community, and it runs on like a different curriculum system to any other subject really because of that, because you get like these, if there's a larger religious group in a certain area, they'll probably get some more prevalence in the creation of the curriculum.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I would agree, actually. I think it is a massive question, and it's a very personal question too, isn't it, for a lot of people? And it is bound by areas, cultures, countries, different things that come into it. Obviously, the first thing that people naturally gravitate to when you talk about belief systems, it is religion in a lot of ways, and that goes back way back in time, doesn't it? But I think I see it similar in regards to, it's kind of your inner world, isn't it? If we think about what some of the things it comes down to, it's your inner world of like your core beliefs about yourself, your beliefs about the meaning of life and the structure of life, how you view it, so kind of your worldview and the life view and how you relate to others. And that does come in different forms, doesn't it? But it's kind of like your inner world mapping your outer world, isn't it, through your belief systems, and they kind of connect together.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's like it's big. It's the key thing. I think it opens up separate questions at the moment, really, doesn't it? About where communities at, I suppose, in terms of we're all a bit more isolated than we've been in the past. So what impact does that have on belief? Does that turn it into a sort of internal bubble that doesn't have an external world to associate it with?
Yeah, it's very true though, isn't it? Because over time, we as society have adapted. So the Western world is more individualistic, and other areas of the world is more kind of anchored in different belief systems. And it does change and it does alter. I think the UK has only 20% of the population that actually defines themselves as a religion or a kind of belief system. So it has significantly changed, because that would have been the opposite way around way back, and not even that far back, to be honest. And it does change society, but it does also change how we approach life and how we are, and in form of your sense of belonging. So you spoke about community, it gives us a sense of belonging, doesn't it? Well, there's an epidemic of loneliness, isn't there, in the world right now? And this probably has some things to do with it. When you anchor yourself into some of those belief systems, it gives you a way of life, it gives you meaning to life, it gives you something to hold yourself accountable to. There's lots of research on belief systems and religions and people that are anchored in something, whatever that is for you, whether it be a religion, whether it be rituals, whether it be ways that you approach life, whether it be meditation or mindfulness. There's so many different clusters to it, isn't there? And kind of cultures that come up to it. But when people anchor into those things, it's proven that we have better mental health, a better ability to empathize with other people. We also don't necessarily kind of come into kind of defense systems or again the sense of belonging, all of these things. So these are actually proven things, but over time it is massively shifting and belief systems are becoming different in a time that we've known ever before.
Yeah. I think it does open up a separate question, doesn't it? It opens up a question about how do we then get that back? It becomes a question of how do we open up community and how do we make it possible? And I think there's obviously community groups that are doing really good work. I think there's just so much more space for it, isn't there? I think another place is like oddly running clubs have become um,
Mhm.
a thing that if you were to talk about things that didn't exist in the way that they do now 15, 20 years ago. Because I think that's almost the time in which the shift of religion in its own way has happened. It's not been a huge amount of time since things have
Yeah.
become as secular as they have. So, yeah, we end up in this place where the question becomes how do we make community more possible so that people's identity is tied more into something? And I think the workplace has slightly become that altar um, on which people throw their entire lives into it and all of their meaning and everything that comes with that. And that obviously can come at a cost, can come with benefits, but it can come at a cost as
Mhm.
well. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, different places are more religious. America, for example, is 80% more religious. Turkey also 80% more religious. Then there's the flip version. So there's a significant difference across the board, but it also becomes then, like you say, into other things, so workplaces, other groups, hobbies, and then it kind of changes identity too, exactly what you've just spoke about. So do we think this is healthy then, or do we think that people do need something to anchor themselves into? What do you see in your sessions? What do people have in kind of that sense of self and identity and belonging and support systems and encouragement, meaning of life, purpose? These are all things proven that we need as human beings, and some of it unexplainable too. But what do you see come up in sessions in some of these areas?
I think a big thing that comes up is certainly in the work that I've done is loneliness. And I think the loss of community has really manifested in that in a
Mm,
really considerable way. There's a work side to it, like I said earlier as well, where sort of people will drive towards moving up to the top position in something, and then that becomes a lonely position in its own right. And
yeah.
um, I think, yeah, the we have that separate arm of working from home increasing as well, and that's created even further loneliness. So, yeah, in terms of the work that I do, we are just giving people that space that they deserve to have and that everybody deserves to have. Everybody deserves to have some time that belongs to them, where someone is listening. And I suppose that's a lot of the gap. That's a lot of what's missing for people, that in the absence of someone to talk to or a group of people to talk to or a group of friends or fellow clergy as it would be if you were a churchgoer, you end up in this place where you're just quite isolated, I suppose.
So
Yeah.
therefore, I mean, this correlates, doesn't it, with statistically again in therapy has been on the rise, and especially since the pandemic, a lot of people started accessing online therapy. It was popular before because obviously people struggle, and sometimes it can be easier to talk to someone not connected to your personal life, not having their emotional feelings about your personal life or personal events. However, it is significantly raising and still is in need. And do you think, therefore, then that is matching because people don't have community? It's more around the loneliness, having that support, having people around you.
Everything that people experienced during COVID just had a hangover that came with it. So it might not be that the working from home stuff actually is the biggest impact.
Very true. I also saw a lot of trauma come up for people when COVID happened because until that point, everyone was kind of work, 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 work. And adulting is hard. Come on, let's be real. So when you're busy all the time, it distracts you from other things and you don't necessarily think or feel so much. Obviously, those things are important, but the majority of people will avoid a lot of things, will distract from a lot of things. Adulting comes into it, life comes into it, work responsibilities, everything. It all builds up, doesn't it? So in the times of COVID, some of these things that you're talking about too, it did give people time, space, thinking, feeling, everything kind of coming back, reflecting on life. It also makes you kind of pivot into different directions from that stop point, because it was a full stop button on the whole world, wasn't it? So in regard to that, a lot of people significantly did have things come up from the past. And ironically, it's also proven that a lot of people turned to religion during those times too.
Again, anecdotally, I think I've got fairly secular friends in truth who have turned to the church for the community side of things in recent years. It's hard to find the type of community that offers, I suppose, the sort of moral arbiter side of things that comes with that person or group that is able to keep on top of actually these are the rules, this is what we do, this is the way that things play out, and having to actually check in with yourself and make sure that you're doing things that are right by you. There's a real push for congruence within that and an expectation that you understand your own moral code and follow it. I think also there's the confessional side of things, which I would argue the guilt side of things isn't necessarily what helps, but the getting things off your chest side of things is helpful in its own right. And I think in a lot of ways, the decline of religion has meant that the therapy room has increased.
Especially with guilt, this is a really good point. Yeah, with the guilt stuff, when people sit in it, it festers, doesn't it, and internalize and jumps to self-loathing, and you bring trauma into that, alters and distorts your core beliefs. So when you tie all that together, it's much more complicated. So there is an element of that would have been part of some of the like classic religion practices, whereas now it is becoming more and more into the therapy room. And again, there is going to be elements of that anyway, because it is a confidential space, it's a safe space, someone not connected to your personal life, all of this stuff. A lot of people really struggle to talk about guilt, shame, fear. All of these topics are always really, really hard for people, but belief systems generally give you those things as well, don't they?
Yeah. A way of understanding it as well, which we could talk about sort of the accuracy of truth claims attached to that, and that could be a conversation that you go around in circles on literally forever. It comes down to the fact that people have had this belief system, particularly around life and death.
Okay, something that you said a little minute ago around kind of the echo chambers and only hearing people that match your belief systems and things like this. Obviously, that's important, but I mean, this is really rife at the minute, so this is why I'm kind of bringing it back in. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, isn't there, around a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of politics, which we won't bring into the episode, but do you think that it's important to have people around you, to have discussions, open dialogue of people that do disagree with you, and be around people that are on the opposite of your belief systems, that do make you question them, that do make you explore them, that do make you reflect and ultimately kind of come into a mutual understanding? How important do you think that is around some of this stuff?
See, I grew up in a very one-sided leaning house, largely because of where I grew up. Certainly in the political sphere, all of my friends, all of my family were all of one political persuasion. There wasn't much in terms of swing, in terms of religious persuasion. I went to a Catholic school. I wasn't a Catholic, but that meant that I saw a slight difference in views. I think if you live under a roof with another group of people, you're going to be brought up with a lot of the same beliefs, which sort of creates that echo chamber in its own right anyway. And then I think in terms of religious viewpoint, having access to people from other communities, I think that's really important that people see different viewpoints and people are able to communicate things. But I think that's the key thing. I think it's that communication.
Yeah, these are all really good points. It is important because what happens in a lot of the world events right now, when people don't talk about this stuff, or they go on the defense, or they only have their own agenda, they don't really consider other people beyond their own belief systems. A lot of obviously ideology stuff comes into some of this as well. It then just creates more and more chaos, doesn't it? And wars, even actually. And as we've spoken about already, it's where you function from, where your community function from, but it's also the world too. And in regard to having the people around you, obviously you're going to naturally gravitate and connect with people that you have things in common with, that you value the same things, that you experience similar things. That's naturally going to happen, but challenging yourself and also hearing other people out, because everyone has different belief systems that might be the complete opposite of yours, and they're also really valid for them. It doesn't have to be for your own. And you might even find that in discussing some of this stuff, that it might change some of your own views, or it might make some of your views stronger, like what you've spoken about. You quite literally immersed into something that was completely different into what your actual inner belief system was, but you still were respectful, I assume, were kind, were holding good communication with these people. It's more than just belief systems, isn't it? It's the fundamentals around respect and communication around it, and having the opportunities to be able to speak to other people as well.
Yeah, I think it's important that you have discussion with people that you don't necessarily agree with. I think it's also important that one thing that I've learned largely through being a religious studies grad and teacher is that there's so many views out there. Like there'll be, you could line up 5 million people and have a conversation with them and they'd all have something slightly different. Like we could look at India as a really good example of this, where Hinduism was basically built out of a load of individual villages along the River Indus, and they all had a very slightly different belief, but you could, because of where they were, you could call them all loosely Hinduism. And it didn't matter because all of these different connections were made and it was all belief in separate gods, but largely having a view in a god and living reasonably harmoniously with that.
I'm going to tap into your RE teaching. What were some of the other things that you've come across and explored in some of your studies, in some of your experience, in some of the things that you taught?
I always like to bring a bit of Buddhism to the table, purely because I think the notion that wanting things is the root of suffering. Um, so in chasing down things, I think it's almost allegorical for overthinking in its own way, because the the very basic version of the story is that Siddhartha Gautama was a prince and then went out of the palace grounds, discovered suffering existing in the wider world, and in discovering that suffering existed, wanted to try and find a way to escape suffering before realizing that basically the thing that was causing him more suffering than anything else was wanting to escape suffering. Um, and I think that if we were to put that into a thoughts and feelings conversation and go, right, well, if you're a person that overthinks, for example, without going too simplistic about it, overthinking largely can mean that you're underfeeling. So if we allow, if we stop trying to escape the uncomfortable feelings eventually they will pass through, and that sort of, again, it works quite allegorically the with the Buddhist position. Um, I think we could apply some Christianity, and I always used to struggle to teach Christianity because kids always thought that they knew it, and then you'd actually get to it. But the story was of this man who went out, and I suppose you can open up the question about the truth claim about around him being the son of God. That would be the Muslim position to question that truth claim, and the Jewish position for that matter. But this idea that there's this person who will sacrifice themselves for the benefit of everybody else because the expectation is that everybody will make mistakes, everybody will sin, everybody will do the wrong thing at some point or another, and that you are forgiven for that is such a weighty thing. So I think, yeah, in terms of stuff that I'd bring into mental health work, they're two really big things that, as much as I don't subscribe particularly to either, the really helpful messages that can be
Yeah.
used.
This is very true. Ironically, so I've researched a lot of religion stuff, and belief systems overall, and ways of life, and my core beliefs, and rituals, and the law of attraction, and you name it, I've researched it. It's something I'm very, very fascinated by. It also was born from my own experience of being brought up by an English mother and a Turkish father. So in religious terms, that's Muslim and Christianity. And then obviously you layer in culture, then you layer in the trauma and abuse that I've experienced. So as you can imagine, my belief systems were all over the place. And it's probably the hardest thing that I ever explored in my therapy sessions, in the personal work that I did on myself, for lots and lots of reasons. My sense of self and identity was kind of all over in a lot of ways. And ironically, the religion stuff, which not a lot of people realize, they're all actually really, really similar in lots of ways. And I don't mean to offend anyone who is listening that is religious, and I'm not disrespecting kind of their own religion either, but at the bottom of all of them, and I say this a lot to a lot of people, it's about being a good person, being a good human, treating people well, being a good family member as much as possible. But yeah, underneath all of it, there is so many things that are the same. And in all of the scriptures and in all of the writings that come up, they're all timeless lessons, aren't they? And I think this is what people misinterpret a lot of the times of when we look at some of these stories, when we look at some of the origins and the founding of the different things that come up, even kind of Buddhism, things like this, people take it quite literal in a lot of ways, but actually it is how you interpret and mold it into your life and you as a person. And it's a guide, isn't it, in what you believe, how you function, how you treat yourself. Obviously, beliefs in afterlife comes into that a lot too, because it's not just this life that we're on now. So there is a lot of complication to it. But yeah, people generally will kind of misunderstand a lot of some of the past stories because obviously they're not relevant so much now in today's life. We wouldn't even have some of those things happen now. Yeah, it's the lessons, isn't it? What we take from it, what we learn from it, how we change ourselves, how we grow, how we treat each other. And that's ultimately what's at the bottom of all of these. Another ironic thing is that most of them are founded in the same place too. The main place of worship is kind of all in the main area. And you also could even bring into belief systems. So I've watched also a lot of documentaries on different rituals around the world, and natural medicines and ceremonies, and you can bring things in from tribal areas and rituals and dances and things that they have. You can bring things in from like Africa or marking of adulthood. There's lots of things, isn't there? There's different things that come up all over the world. There's like bull ceremonies even where people do bullfighting, and you could even class this as kind of a belief system, and ayahuasca or plant medicine type stuff. And there's so much more when people scratch the surface. It's not always around yeah, like some of these stories or some of these other things.
Yeah.
Where do you think belief systems, we've touched on quite a lot of heavy belief systems so far, but where do you think they come from? Because a lot of this stuff is subconscious, isn't it? And some of it's conditioned even, when you think about your upbringing, things like that. Where do you think some of this stuff comes from?
It goes back such a long way. Like we go back to paintings on walls in caves, and there's people worshipping deities all the way back there. The idea of something to worship, I personally think, comes from a place of we can't fully understand ourselves. But in an attempt to try and understand ourselves and the world that we're in, we sort of outsource the problem and give it to some sort of deification and go, right, I don't get this bit, therefore it's God. That's where I think a lot of it comes from. I think we are just bigger than we ever realize, and I think every person is bigger than they ever realize. And trying to understand all of that potential could eat you alive.
How do you think your own belief systems stay neutral for your client work in regard to some of this stuff that we've spoken about today?
I think in the teaching work that I've done, I've always been really careful to not push a certain viewpoint. I've always been really careful that, like, I've never minded telling students that I don't have any particular beliefs, but at the same time, I don't look down on any other beliefs, so to speak. I think people are just looking for a home in something. And if they find it in something that I don't necessarily agree with, who am I to say that that's wrong? Again, it's back to the point that I was making a second ago. People are bigger and more complicated than just individual pieces of information about them. So to sit in judgment of that one piece of information is of very little use.
Uh, okay. I mean, we could talk all day on some of this stuff. It's a really, really big topic. There's a lot of things that it'll stir up for a lot of people, and hopefully get people reflecting on some of their own belief systems too. Okay. Do you have any pearls of wisdom for anyone listening regarding exploring some of this stuff and trying to connect with their own belief systems in whatever way that looks like for them?
Big question. I am largely of the view that we live in a world at the moment where so many people are pointing fingers at whatever another person's view is, or ideology is, or political persuasion, or religious persuasion, or everything that comes with that. And it creates this space where empathy is just lost. And I think being able to tune into a conversation with a person who you don't necessarily agree with and be able to acknowledge, actually, I'm getting quite angry about this. Maybe interrogate the feeling more than the point that the person is making, because they've picked up their view pretty much in the same way that you have. They've just heard it from a different person who said a different thing. We can check in on our own anger, perhaps interrogate the point more calmly and with more of an intention of understanding how they've ended up where they are. And in my head, that just creates a slightly nicer place for all of us to live.
Yeah, I very nicely put there, because everyone's beliefs come from something somewhere, maybe something way beyond, like you said. And some of them serve us, some of them can be unhealthy, some of them can be conditioning. But regardless, it's from that person's perception, isn't it? And it's from their experiences. And belief systems is something that people have very strongly inside, and it can bring up a lot of stuff. And we have to be able to recognize that in ourselves and others, and to be able to see the diversity that is in the world. But ultimately, what we all could aim for is unity amongst that too.
I just think you get a better conversation, don't you? You get a better conversation out of somebody that you're trying to understand rather than someone that you're trying to tell why they're wrong.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's
I agree.